Hi, in this video demonstration we're going to take a look at some of the deeper features of the matte shadow reflection shader. We gave you a nice quick look in an earlier video demonstration how to create some nice flat endless horizons, things for product shots that we see often used for car commercials or cell phone ads and liquor sodas. Something that we can do for magazine print or even for television, an endless horizon for our 3D models, where the models look nice and they're the center of the attention, and everything else kind of fades off into nothingness as far as the eye can see. The matte shadow reflection shader, that's a good purpose for it, but it is not its only purpose. And one of its other purposes is for compositing against live footage or live photos. In other words, putting our 3D objects, 3D animations, 3D artwork into an actual photograph or film footage. To get started here, I've got a brand new empty 3D scene. I'm going to go ahead and load in my standard mental ray setup here with my global illumination and everything. If you don't have one of those yet, you probably should take a look again at some of the earlier lessons that we've done and take a look at some of those global illumination and final gather settings and everything to get you started with something basic right up front. Okay, so what we've got here is we're going to use this shader to composite a 3D object into a photograph. I've got a couple that we're going to do in order to talk about the differences in the shader here. We've got a wintry scene that you should have been able to download, and we're going to composite, the beginnings of maybe a snowman or something like that in there. And then I've also got this kind of tropical ocean mountain scene here, taken a little island called Moorea. And this is a bay where we can test out some of its reflective purposes and stuff like that as well. To get us started, we'll go with the winter one to begin with here. And the main information I need from this image, first and foremost, is its dimensions. Now, if I was working with footage that happened to be full HD, I would know that I need 1920 by 1080 for the aspect ratio and the dimensions here, 16:9. For a photograph, this can be all kinds of different numbers. This is a photograph, kind of a free desktop background that you've probably seen all over the internet that we're going to use here. But its dimensions are not exactly spot on for anything other than what this photo was in the first place. It's got an 1100 by an 855 dimension here. So our render is going to need to match that, at least that aspect ratio. So 1100 by 855. Let's go back into our 3D scene here and go into the render setup. On the common tab here, we need to change our output size to custom. And I'm going to put in 1100 width by, what was it again? I forget so quickly. 855 there. Now this is going to be a huge render. The aspect ratio shows up down here of 1.287. I don't want to waste that much time waiting on an 1100 pixel image to finish rendering out to show you this. So what we can do is actually click this little button here, the lock aspect ratio, and then I can reduce this to 800 over 622 will automatically kind of show up for me. Something of a more manageable size there. And that'll help us in the end when we do a render get it going a little bit quicker than that. Maybe a little smaller here. Let's go with 700 by, let's go down here at 500. You can see how they kind of jump to change. And that gives us the exact same dimensions as the photograph we're about to use to plug into 3D Studio. Now, in order to do this correctly, I'm going to come down to my perspective view and I'm going to hit the Shift F to turn on my safe frames, which shows that aspect ratio in my viewport. And gives me a better idea of without stretching that image or that picture. In order to get it in here, in order to composite together, I need to go ahead and hit the Alt-B, which brings up my viewport configuration settings. You can get here a number of different ways. You can come up to the Views menu, Viewport Background, and configure your viewport background, and you can get that same thing. You can also kind of come in here and click on where you will go to your realistic or shaded, select Configure, and then jump over to the background. It's the same location as well. What we're going to do is mark Use Environment Background here. and say OK. Now right now the environment background is jet black, so what comes up is also jet black. If we want to add in our image, we need to hit 8 on our keyboard or find it under the rendering menu, environment, and we've got to put a map in the background rather than just this flat color of black. So in here we'll go ahead and select the None Channel button, bitmap, and find our winter scene here and say OK. It loads up, loads up pretty dead wrong here for us. So what we need to also do is bring this over and adjust some of the settings here. If I hit M on my keyboard, it'll bring up my material editor, and I can click and drag this and drop it into an empty texture slot, make it an instance, and say OK. Because we added an image into an environment map, it's trying to stretch it spherically like it did with our HDR spherical images. What we want to do is change that spherical back to screen so that it shows the entire image just on our camera plane and nothing else. Okay? From here, we can leave that open for right now, but from here we just need to kind of create something. Let's go ahead with a nice wintry sphere here. I'm going to go ahead and create a sphere right smack in the center, as though it's kind of half buried here. We'll leave it at its location. If I center it in my screen there, and I can sort of kind of try and line this up with the image as best I can. Now this is kind of a hill, so it's going to be some guesswork and some repeat back and forth here as well. This sphere I can give a texture. For right now, we'll just go ahead and make it kind of solid white, just to kind of blend in a little bit. The snow is a little speckled. We would actually give this a snow texture that would hopefully match in the future here with this stuff. But for right now, this will work fine for us. I can turn up the specularity a little bit, maybe about 40, just to make it a little bit brighter or shinier. And then I need to create a ground plane for it. Now it doesn't have to be huge, because again, it's going to try and blend in with the background, compositing everything out, or keying everything out except for shadows and reflections should I choose. So I'm going to make this ground plane here and hop over to my Modify tab, and I might make it 150 by about 150 and reduce the segments down to 1, because I don't want a lot of these cornered edges here kind of showing up past where some of these hills are and stuff like that. But I also don't want to leave any of this sphere underneath here. And I can solve that maybe just by raising the sphere up a little bit so it's only half sunk down in the snow, or making my plane a little bit bigger. For this moment, this point right here, we can go ahead and we can call this good and composited. We've also got some other options that we could use in the future there to make sure that this is exact. It works a little bit better in scenes with hard edges rather than organic ones. So let's just go with this for right now. And let's go back into our material editor and let's create our matte shadow reflection. Again, select an empty texture slot. Click on that standard in order to change the type of shader that we're going to use. And select matte shadow and reflection. Now instead of the camera mapped background here being a solid color, as it is, I can go ahead and assign that to my ground plane right there. We're going to want to add into the channel box here this same image. So if I go ahead and right click and copy and then right click and paste into the channel button, you'll notice that instead of black or a flat color like our endless horizon, we get this image going on here. I can select my plane here and Alt-X to see through it a little bit so I can make sure that I'm lining things up as well as seeing where my shadows and stuff are. And if we do just a quick render, you'll notice that you know, it does key out that whole plane fairly well. It doesn't look very good yet because we need some lights in our scene in order to make this effect actually take hold and get some shadows and stuff. Let's go ahead and create some. Let's go over to our Create tab, over to our lights, and into our standard lights here again. We'll go with the good old standby Mental Array Area Omni, and I will create a light in the scene. This scene is going to have to match our scene in our photograph here. And it looks like the sunshine's coming from this other side here, so we'll move the light to the other side. As well as, if I Alt-X here, I can see a little bit of my shadow as well as the shadows underneath here. as well as maybe try and get them going in the right direction here, which looks like it's kind of being cast a little farther away over there. Pull that away to get some longer stretched shadow there. I don't want to go off the edge again. Remember, I can always make this a little bit bigger to maintain maybe not my width, looks like my length. And then I can pull the light a little bit further back as well to make sure that that shadow is kind of matching up down here. Also, in my area light parameters, this is a little bit of a fuzzy shadow rather than anything else, so maybe I will bump up my radius to about 10 and put 20 in my samples for good measure. Now, when I render, I should get a shadow that looks almost as though it's lying directly on the snow. We can also tell some very, very awful things happening here, right? Our shadows with snow and this nice blue environment come up very, very blue, whereas our shadows are coming up very, very grotesque and black here. Let me Alt-W to open up my scene here. And we can go ahead and fix that by going to our light settings here. Select our light, go to our Modify tab, and under the shadow parameters, we can do a few things here. Maybe change the color. I might even use my color picker to choose a color directly from our scene there for our shadows, and that helps with these shadows there very well for certain. Looks like maybe a little bit darker I can go, so I can bring open my menu and kind of just darken that up just a little bit. Maybe even add a little bit more in the radius to fuzz my shadow out just a little bit more until they do match a little bit closer. And now we've really kind of started compositing this ugly sphere here into our scene and tried to match the shadows that go off in the good particular way here. Other things I can do, maybe move this over just a little bit so that it catches that whole shadow in all of its good glory. We've also got our texture maybe to concern ourselves with, and our ambient color, stuff like that. Maybe we can unlink it and choose to add, oops, not that gross black there. Let me select my light again. But maybe this blue that we put in there for some of that ambient coloring. We've also got the environment to worry about. Right now it's a black as well. If we kind of paste in that ambient color there, maybe even a little bit lighter, we can kind of open this up and maybe select a good dusty color from that as well. Maybe again lock the ambient and diffuse color just to get some of that a little bit nicer, and try our rendering again, and then some of that black disappears because we're using the ambient color for our global lighting up here. That should hopefully kind of match the mountains and everything in the background now fairly well. Not too shabby. We just composited the first lump of our snowman here into a wintry scene that's a photograph. So that's a great use there. Let's go ahead and let's take this same idea across with something else. Let's go back. We're gonna keep the plane and the sphere here, but I want to put my ambient light source back to black before I forget, so that those shadows are nice and default somewhere. I also want to put my shadows here back to black if we're going to switch images. And then let's take a look at that other image that we had downloaded, the Pow Pow, the bay in Moorea down there in the South Pacific, with some water and some completely different colors and stuff like that we're going to actually do some stuff with as well. If we go ahead and double check the dimensions, this one's 1102 by 814. So all these images, depending on how the artist cropped them, etc., are going to change on us a little bit. So we'll go to our custom. I'm going to unlink the image aspect ratio, and I'm going to say 1102 for the width and 814 for the height. Then I can lock those aspect ratios again and maybe drop that down good again to about 500 in the height, and let it auto calculate that other thing. You might notice that the current image in there gets stretched or squashed a little bit because it was not quite that same aspect ratio. It's not terrible, but it's definitely going to be resized. If I then go back to my perspective view and hit Alt B, Oops, not Alt B. We've already got to our environment. I need to hit 8 to go to our environment. Or the material editor down here where I've got it as an instance already. And I can come into the bitmap parameters and select the different image this time. That should swap out all over the place. Just to be sure, I can right click and copy and come back up to my matte shadow reflection texture here and paste so that that image also appears in the how to composite out area here. As is right now, we've got now the new image being shown to us here. Let's see what we've got here for a moment. And we've got these nice grotesque black shadows and everything that we're going to go ahead and realign. For this kind of stuff, it's kind of real great. We got to make sure that our sizes and stuff like that really match up. And for this, we'd probably have like a boat that we've created in 3D that we want to do something a little bit better than just a sphere. But for right now, this will work for us. I can change. Let's go ahead and change this to, I don't know, maybe like a yellow-orange color for our sphere. Just something other than white. And then in our matte shadow reflection texture here, shadows is working fine. That's all good. I need to double check my light source here, and there's not a lot of shadows on the water here, so I've got to kind of take a look at where these shadows are kind of coming from in the background. And I've got some things, looks like some shadows stretching off a little bit differently here, which means I need to Alt W, select my light, and kind of realign to get the proper light happening there a little bit. I might also raise it up in the sky because it's we don't have those long stretching shadows. We've just got kind of the few shorter, smaller shadows. It's more of a midday image rather than an early morning. So I can adjust my light depending on all of this good stuff. And maybe like fuzz that out. Because we're over water, I might even reduce the density of my shadows quite a bit, maybe 0.4, 0.5. And then we can do a render here to make sure. But we start to see our sphere come through on this nice tropical bay image here. And in fact, everything below does disappear. We've got a little bit of a shadow there, which is fine. We could probably spend some time really trying to get those shadows correct here, because I've probably got my light source in the wrong spot, but that's okay. What I want to show you is as well the reflection capabilities here a little bit. So on our matte shadow reflection, let's scroll down a little bit past shadows to reflections, and let's turn on those receive reflections. As is, it defaults us with glossy samples of 8. It tells you, gives you a little hint in here that 0 is a mirror. We can go ahead and render this, and what we end up with is this flat, mirrored, reflective copy here on our water, which is not exactly very realistic or how it would come across in the end. So this is exactly wrong for what we're really kind of trying to do here. Back over here, we can take a look at the maximum distance. If, let's say, I choose 50, as far as 50 units are concerned for a distance, and then try my render again, then I start to get just a little bit of that reflection of this orange sphere floating in the water down here, rather than this perfect glossy image. And that's step 1 here to kind of help make our reflections a little bit nicer. That's pretty good, actually. We can also kind of reduce, because water's a little bit shinier, so maybe we can get a little close to that mirrored status, as well as if we go to up here at the top again, we've got the ability to put in a bump map. I can add in, just like we made waves on our water in the old video demonstrations, we can add in a noise here maybe, and let's reduce kind of the size, turn up to fractal, give ourselves some good high levels. And add a little bit of that bump there. 0.3, let's test out what we've got. To kind of break up the reflective image here a little bit and make it look like it's going along with these choppy little waves here. All right. We can try increasing Let's go with, let's just jump it up all the way to 1 and see what we get here. A little bit more choppy maybe. And maybe increasing the amount of reflection that we've got can help us out there as well. But now we're starting to see some of the blue from the background, and now it's kind of broken up image here now, but we still get some of that reflection, and that's helping us composite this sphere into this scene as though it were there in the first place. Next we can kind of reduce the intensity of our light since it's kind of an overcast day. Put in some maybe not that much gray. Put in some skylight environment over here somewhere, and really start to get more of an overall similarity to the light that will match our image a little bit. Still a little bit bright, but you can start to see the idea here. And then just play around with, let's say, max distance. We can bump that up to 75. Maybe reduce that even further to get a little bit more of a solid reflection. And really, we're starting to composite pretty well now. Okay, so there's our matte shadow reflection texture, combined with things like some HDR light images and stuff like that, and we can get to compositing some really cool stuff into our three-dimensional scenes. All right.